Hi, this is Jack Aldane for IR Magazine, and I'm stood here with Martin Ziegenbalg, the Executive Vice President and Head of Investor Relations for Deutsche Post DHL. Good to have you here.
Good being here, thank you.
Excellent. Now, I wanted to ask you, based on what was discussed on the panel earlier, about how you deal with employees at a time of crisis. Could you tell us a little bit about what was discussed on the panel and your perspective on this particular issue?
Yeah, I think what we found over the last occasion to train crisis situation, of course you have your skills and practices in dealing with the external audience. They want to be updated on what happened, why is it a crisis, why is the share price reacting so strongly. But let's not forget about the internal audience, the employees, whether or not they are shareholders, but there may be instances where you have changes in management that make it necessary that you also address the internal audience from an IR point of view. And that's something that we don't necessarily like to leave to internal comms only, but basically we find it very useful to communicate into the internal organization from an IR point of view. What's the investor view? Why has the market reacted? He has reacted on a given day.
Okay, so let me ask you now a little bit about how you manage your employees specifically and what you do or in fact don't tell them immediately when you're in the midst of a crisis or a problematic situation.
Well, obviously, you don't treat them any different to the external audiences when it comes to giving away any details. But it is, from our point of view, important to have an established comms channel in place. So if you only reach out as an IR when there is a crisis, then that's probably too late to start that practice, right? And so therefore, if you have something like a monthly perception update on how the market sees the company in its sector and what's keeping investors ticking, people may have a better understanding of why a certain situation is seen more critical by investors.
You mentioned in your first answer about when employees also happen to be shareholders. Is there any way in which you may act or speak differently around them? And is there any sort of special managerial techniques you employ with them in this sort of situation?
Well, in some respects, it's helpful because they are investors themselves, so they feel the same experience like any external investor. But let's not forget, employee shareholders have an above average high financial exposure personally to that one specific equity story, and that makes them, of course, very, very sensitive. And therefore, even without a crisis, they appreciate to be kept abreast with what's going on with the share price, where's the valuation heading, and why is this a more critical time, and that's a good process to have in place.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the practical changes that you've implemented in your department over the last sort of, say, 12 to 18 months?
Well, if anything, we probably have even intensified our IR communication into not only the board management, but the wider management audience, and sending out like weekly research summaries just to make sure that they know how the market is ticking.
Okay. I'd like to ask a little about sort of some of the highlights that you've seen from this year's Global Forum and what you've sort of taken away really as sort of the big bottom line headlines.
Well, I think a topic that's very close to my heart is the whole area of ESG topics becoming of more and more relevance to not only specialized funds, but to each and every institutional investor out there. That's something that we've been preparing for, and that's part of the equity story going forward, which means it's not a special interest type of story to be told separately.
Okay. Finally, then, I suppose the question why you think it's important for the IR community to come to events like this and why they should continue to learn from each other and share experience and anecdotes in this way.
Well, if you look at it on a global scale, IR professionals, it's still a pretty small community. So I think whenever there's an opportunity to exchange views, experiences, best practice, that's something where usually everyone takes something with them from those events. Plus, these are typically pretty smart guys and fun to work with.
All right, Martin, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.